I think I heard she was the Oracle of Massachusetts. So I won't take up too much time, but what a privilege it is to have people like this participate in our meeting. And so, Missy, thank you so much for agreeing to speak, and I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you so much, Sam. I was just turning up my volume a little bit. Okay. My name is Missy, and I am an alcoholic. And it is a pleasure. What? Hi, Tom. A lot of people I know here, and a lot of people I hope to get to know. This has been such a wonderful format for me since March, I think, when I joined. But I want to thank you, Sam, very much. You've been very generous and very kind. And, I was thinking today of some of the things that I was going to try to say tonight, and, how that usually goes. I don't know what I'm going to say. So during the silence, I just ask God to use me as an instrument, and whatever happens, happens. But I do have a thought that I want to share. I was thinking today how lucky I am. I am overwhelmed with just that thought today, to be able to be here, to share with all of you people. My life was in such a shambles when I walked into AA many years ago. And, I can get up in the morning and I have a roof over my head and I have a beautiful town to live in. And it was sunny today. And, and I also noticed more and more these days that I don't have a tremendous amount of fear in my life. I'm not saying that I don't have it on occasion, but that wasn't always the case. Certainly in my life, I was riddled with it. And I think what I'd like to do tonight, just for a little bit, is just tell you a little bit about myself. I found that to be very helpful when I landed in AA, to hear people in the halls speak about how they were feeling. I do recall when I was about a year sober, I was absolutely terrified of speaking. It was like being back in speech class at Marblehead High School. I was so self-centered. I was so bound up with myself. And to be sitting in an AA hall, I had nothing I thought I could say. I knew how to stay sober maybe for about a year, but that I really wanted to be profound. I had nothing to say. But they asked me to speak, and it was at a women's meeting one night. And I was walking up. They had a little card table in the front of the room with a big book on it, and that's where I was to go and sit. And I was terrified. And I remember walking up the aisle to the front of the room, and this old timer, this woman who probably had about 30 years then, grabbed my arm and she whispered in my ear. I leaned down and she said, "Missy, it would be really important tonight if you talked about not so much the events that happened to you, because we all have those, but how you felt." And I've never forgotten that. That was a long time ago. I got sober on July 15th, 1979, and I just graduated. I just celebrated 41 years of sobriety this past July. And I'm very grateful for that. But I've never forgotten what she told me, because that was really how I started to evolve in sobriety, was when I would go to these meetings, sit in the halls here in Marblehead, and people would talk about how they felt as a child, right now, present day, and I would be amazed. I had never heard that before. I had spent many, many years since I was a teenager going to therapists, psychiatrists. I was always looking for some kind of a solution. I didn't know what was wrong with me. I slipped into alcoholism in my teenage years. I think I probably had a beer when I was about 12 years old. I remember it like it was last night. And I was in a car with some boy who obviously must have been 16. And I can't even imagine how I was even allowed to be in a car with a 16-year-old at the age of 12 or 13. Where were my parents? I mean, it was just like bombs away all the time. My home life was, oh God, from the outside looking in, we looked we looked okay from the outside. My dad was a pretty successful partner in a big law firm in Boston. He was very bright. He was very alcoholic, and none of us knew it. I was the oldest of 4 children. I kind of took care of my mother. I became her mother. We'd sit on the couch every night together, and I would tell her how to act when he came home, because if she didn't, then it would be total chaos for the entire evening. And I was terrified all the time. And there was an emptiness in me that I guess I was depressed. I just felt so alone and frightened all the time. And when I had that beer, it was like, my God, I could relax for the first time and breathe after 12 years of being on this planet. And so I slipped into that at an early age, and I always was seeking it out. It was easy to get in my house because our liquor cabinet was filled. Um, there was a lot of stuff that went on in that home. Um, I'll tell you a very quick story that really sort of was my watershed moment. And I also have to mention that Mary Thayer, who a lot of you know here, she and I met each other when we were about 6 years old in the first grade. And we became fast friends, little girls, and we we had a good time. We still do, actually. And she was at my house one afternoon, and I guess I was about 12. I guess we were about 11 or 12 years old. And my mom was home, and we were up in my attic, and I was sort of a curious kid. I was always looking for things. I always thought there was something up. I always had an inkling or maybe an intuitive thought somewhere. I don't even know what it was, but I just think things were out of sync. And I was always trying to look for the answer. I would sit on the stairs at night and listen to my parents' conversation just so I could get sort of an idea of what was going on. So we were up in the attic, and I was going through an old trunk my mom had, and I opened it up, and there was a bunch of stuff in there that belonged to her, and it was old, and it was a scrapbook. And I opened up the scrapbook, and it was my parents' wedding scrapbook. And Mary was across the room, I think. And I looked at it, and there was a little card, a bunch of cards there. And I opened up one of the cards, and it said, "Congratulations on your marriage, and how's little Missy doing?" And I said, "Oh my goodness." And I had Mary come over. Imagine that, how many years ago that was. I didn't know who I was, where I came from. And I for some reason, Mary and I were, we were just little kids. We just sort of imagined, I thought maybe I was an orphan. I had lived, I was born during the Second World War in the mid 40s. And I mean, this was like, I was shocked. So for some reason, I did not tell my mother. I didn't go to my mother with this for a while. And I don't remember how long it was, but eventually I did. And she took me into her bedroom, and we sat on her bed, and she started to cry. And she said, "That your dad out there in the living room, reading the paper, having a drink, is not your father." And I said, "He isn't?" She said, "No, Missy. Your father was killed in World War II. He was a pilot. You were a year old. And when you were 3 years old, I married your dad, and he adopted you." And I said, "Why didn't you tell me?" She said, "Well, we didn't know how to. We talked to our minister, we talked to our doctor, and they thought it would be best if we just go along." Well, the reason I'm telling you this story is because my stepfather, my dad, it was so confusing, never said a word when I left that room. He just looked at me. I don't even know if he knew what was going on. We never discussed it again, but he was never very kind to me. And that is what this little alcoholic head took in. And I connected the dots, and I said, okay. First of all, I was the only blonde with blue eyes in the family. My brothers were very dark haired with brown eyes, as is my sister. And I always used to wonder what the heck, it was just a very confusing time, and no one talked about it. And that was also the error, I'm sure. So I go along, and that was the coat that I wore for a very, very long time. And I left that home when I was 18 years old to get out. I was very rebellious. I drank right through high school. I barely got out of high school because I was just not focused on anything except drinking. I could not imagine not drinking, because when I didn't drink, I couldn't function. And I had this emptiness in my soul that was, well, Mary, years later, when we would talk, she told me, she said, you have a hole in your gut with the wind blowing through it. And I said, I do. I don't know how we survive. I speak for all of us. It is such a brutal thing, but it was the only thing that kept me going. It was, and I developed some very, very strong survival skills just to get through. So life went on. I left home at 18. I wanted a child. I wanted a child. And I look back on that, and that was very sad to me. And I had a beautiful baby girl, married this boy he was 19. I was just 18. That was the only time I could leave the house. My dad was a big, powerful lawyer, and I could walk out. He had no power over me. It was terrible. I just thumbed my nose and eloped, and I was divorced at 20. I had another marriage later on to an alcoholic. I mean, horrific alcoholic. And I look at this letter that Bill Wilson wrote about emotional sobriety and the dependence, and that's where the dependence started, on men that had money that would take care of me. But the price I paid, and of course I could hide behind a lot of that because they were a lot worse than I was. I did get divorced. I had one more child. So now the path that I have now made for myself is that I am a single mother with 2 children. And I did the best I could, but I was not a good mom. I was an alcoholic mother. I was not present for my children. And I moved back to Marblehead in December of 1978. It's a nice time to move. I mean, for God's sakes, it was like winter. And I was literally homeless. I never thought about that until I think about a year ago that came to me. I slept on a friend's couch in Marblehead, another gal that I had grown up with. I didn't have a home to go to, and I had these 2 little children. I put them in school. I was coming very quickly to the end of my drinking, but I didn't know it. Things were really catching up with me. I was living in this small town. I was out at the bars. People were getting to know Missy. Very inappropriate things. I ended up in places I never should have been, with people I never should have been with. And sometimes I think about how lucky I was to survive all of that. So the next 6 months, from December until July of 1979, I went down a very slippery slope, and I became very sick, sicker than I had ever been. This disease is very progressive, and I would go out at night to go to the bars, and I wouldn't come home. And by that time, my daughter was now the mother of me, and she would take care of her little brother. They were 9 years apart, and she was a budding teenager, and I wouldn't come home at night. And, you know, I think about that a lot. I did, certainly when I got sober, all the time. Came into this program with a tremendous amount of shame. And I swore I would never tell people any of these things. Never, 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 ever would ever reveal any of that stuff, because I didn't know what I had. And, but I'll tell you, if it was today I was pulling that stuff and drinking like that, I would have lost those children. I would have had children's services come knocking on my door, because people are so aware today of these things. So I dodged that bullet, and I came into AA, as I said, July 15th, and I wasn't detoxed. I came into the halls, and it's a very interesting, unique story that I have, because that was the time when we didn't have any cell phones. We didn't even have voicemail recorders on the phones. I mean, we had to wait for people to pick the damn phone up. So I went out on July 14th, business as usual. I'm at a party till about 5 or 6 in the morning. Nothing major happened. I just was drunker than a skunk, sitting on someone's kitchen floor, drinking out of a bottle. I thought I was sort of a hot shit. You know, I was ridiculously disgusting, actually. And I ended up going home with somebody I didn't even know. It was horrible. I woke up at 10 in the morning and I came back, drove home. I was half in the bag still, and I was sort of swerving on the little streets in Marblehead. Came to my apartment and walked into the house, and my children had left. My daughter left me a very nasty note, by the way, on my kitchen table. She said, "You have done this again, mother, and I've taken Billy out for breakfast, and you weren't home all night." And I just looked at this note, and I didn't know what to do. And so the pretense that I had about me, this false person that I had the Boston Globe delivered to my home every Sunday. Now, really, I couldn't even read practically. I was so gone. But I thought if people saw that outside of my apartment, they would say things are pretty normal with that young woman in there who doesn't come home at night. So I dragged in this huge 40-pound paper and I put it on my kitchen table and I was whipping through it, standing up, I was crazy. And my eyes fell on a Ann Landers column. And I looked at it and it was a prayer. And I had never seen it before. And I read it. It was Footprints in the Sand. And I was amazed. It was like I was struck. And I remember stepping back, and my refrigerator was right behind me with all my bills on it that I hadn't looked at in months. And I remember it was like somebody had just opened up the top of my head, and this warm liquid just went right down through me to my toes. I couldn't believe it. I've never had that since. It was maybe, I don't know, 2, 3 seconds. And at that moment, everything was like perfect. I had this incredible sense of well-being that I had never ever had before in my life. And the next moment, I don't know how long, just a second or two, I had this vision in my forehead I could see in my mind's eye the 2 AAs. And I said, "Oh my God, I'm alcoholic." It just, boom. And I was walking to my phone, which was, of course, the landline. And as I was walking to the phone, this other voice, which I've come to know as a lower power, it's been familiar. I've had a lot of familiar times with that one. But it was saying to me, if you go to the phone and pick this up and call central service, it's over. You don't want to do this. And the miracle of my life then and tonight is the fact that I picked that phone up and I called central service and I went against that voice for God knows it was a miracle. And I had someone call me about a half hour later, a nice man that I got to know in Marblehead. I'd been sober a long time. And that was the beginning of my journey. Now, meanwhile, it's a nice summer afternoon. I don't even remember half of what happened, but I tried to get this one over here in the square, Mary Thayer. She had moved to Brunswick, Maine. She was the only person in the world that I would ever talk to as a woman. I didn't particularly care for women, I have to add. You know, women kind of knew what other women are up to, and I didn't particularly like women. Plus, my husband cheated on them a lot, and I really hated women. So Mary was the only one that I could call and trust, and I called her all day long. No answer, all day. And I couldn't believe it. And I couldn't leave a message because, there were no recorders. And so what happened was finally that evening around 8 o'clock, I got her. And I told her that I said, "I'm an alcoholic." She said, "Yes, yes, you are." She was very kind. We talked for hours. And another nice little miracle, about a month later, when my bill came in, that phone call was not on that bill. And I was paycheck to paycheck, guys, back then, paycheck to paycheck. So it was amazing. And I told Mary about my experience with prayer, footprints in the prayer, and I said it was so spiritual. And she said, "Well, I have to tell you that you had an experience, and I want you to remember that it was a spiritual experience. God must have come down and just whacked you across the head with a 2x4, right?" I said, "Okay." She said, "It was not an awakening." I said, "It wasn't?" She said, "No, you're not awake." And I didn't know what the heck she was talking about. So I said, okay. So I just listened. A couple of days later, I think I asked her to be my sponsor, and she said she didn't really want to be my sponsor. And I was very offended by that. And I said, why? Why wouldn't you want to sponsor me? She said, because I'm afraid we're friends, and I'm going to have to tell you some things that might hurt our friendship, because I'm always going to tell you the truth. If I pat you on the back, Missy, I'll pat you right into the grave. I said, oh, it'll be all right. No, I won't be mad at you. Well, I was glad many days that she lived in Brunswick, Maine, and I lived in Marblehead. I'll tell you, because I wrote in my diary, I couldn't stand her. She'd say things that were so mean to me. So anyway, that was the beginning of my journey in this program. And we're talking about emotional sobriety tonight, and I had absolutely none of it. And Bill's letter mentions the age of 17 when we come in. Well, I think that I was probably about 14. And I really struggled for a long, long time with that. First of all, I had so much fear in my sober being, and I could not even imagine. When I walked into the halls, I said, I really thought, and I've heard this for years around here, that once I put down my alcohol, I'd be okay. But what am I going back to? I'm going back to nothing. And as my husband would have said, an empty suit. I was nothing. I had no moral compass. I had nothing internal. And I was, as our friend Kurt Z says so many times, and I've heard him here, a false self. I just was terrified. And everything that I drank over, all those emotions, I couldn't. I'm sitting in the halls. I'm detoxing in the halls. I'm hallucinating when I go to my little job. I'm seeing rabbits and cats or something under my desk at work. It was horrendous, but I hung on because I had a sliver of hope. And what happened was that I started to work this program because I had no other choice. And I sort of became a little bit awake. I was so hungry and thirsty to find out what was wrong with me. And I'm so grateful tonight to be able to say that I had no outside resources to make me feel better or to enable me. I didn't have a lot of money. I had a family that was not helping me out. And I couldn't even ask them if I wanted to. I had a little job. I had a ton of bills. I was $20,000 in debt. And in 1979, it was like millions to me. And it was. I didn't know what to do. My head was just full of this fear. So I had to go to something, and I had to believe that there was something that was going to take care of me. And people said, you've got to find a higher power that's bigger than you, something that is bigger than you. And I would go into my bathroom at night and shut the door and get on my knees in front of my bathtub and just say, whatever. And I started to have things happen. And but I started to, oh my God, I had to find a God that I could do business with. And I would go to that God, but my emotions were terrible. I would go home from meetings and I would rage at those children. Rage. I didn't do it in public. I didn't do it I was a big phony. I would go to meetings and they'd say, how are you? I'd say, great, fine. I would hide behind the guy in front of me because I didn't want to be called on. I was so scared. I didn't think I had anything to say. I had a father that told me I had nothing to say. He told me I was stupid. This was so cellular in me. I was just frightened to death. Why wouldn't I want to drink? I mean, for years I had to do that just to live in the world. It was so foreign to me and so scary. And that was what I was living with. I'd come home from work at night and I'd open my door and my children would just be stunned. They'd just look at me with these big eyes, the children that I loved more than anything in the world. And they'd wonder what I was going to be like that night. And I remember going to a meeting one night and this old timer was sitting there. He was a wonderful man. He said, how are you, Missy? I said, I'm okay. I said, my kids are, really bugging me. He said, what's wrong with your kids? I said, well, they're upset. I'm at meetings all the time. Little selfish. He said, well, how many meetings do you go to? I said, every night, he said, well, how long you been sober now? I said, oh, about 8 months. He said, you think you're going to be drinking? I said, no, I'm okay. I'm, working a program. I've got a sponsor. And he said, well, I think you probably can stay home a couple of nights with your children. Right. And I stopped and I thought, oh, God, maybe, it was another thought. And I started to do that. Oh God, there was so much damage and there was so much I had to do, but it was a day at a time. And I started to work these steps. And I started to work these steps on things that were disturbing me. I was extremely jealous of women, especially pretty women. I thought I could never, ever admit that to anybody. I had to do a fourth step on a woman that came into AA that I hated. Didn't even know. And I told Mary, and she said, why do you hate her? Do you know her? I said, no, but I hate her. Just hate her. She said, well, what is it about her that I just don't like her. I don't like the way. But you see, it was that dependency again, because of course I had a boyfriend in AA at that point, which was ridiculous for both of us. And he kind of liked her and I was terrified. So I'm now back again, and I was in my mid 30s and I'm now right around 14, 15 years of age in high school, jealous of the boy that likes another girl. And I had to live with all of that stuff. And I did a fourth step on that. That was the only fourth step that I did at that time about that. And it was very revealing to me. And I had to give that to God. And everything underneath all of it, everything I've ever had to deal with this sobriety stuff is fear, just total fear. And, I just, I had just briefly, I had a terrible time with my finances. I was very dependent on people that would help me with that, pay for things, hook up with someone that maybe could, support me. Date the guy that you're renting an apartment from, hoping that maybe he'll shave something off the rent. I mean, that's who I was. That's who I was. And I brought all of that with me. It's like I was dragging a little red wagon behind me with all the wreckage of my past and all those things that had to be undone. I just, I was overly sensitive to criticism. I was raging at these poor children. I had depression. I was isolated within my family. I had such a altered state of who I was. I was empty. I was an empty suit. And the only thing that could help me was this program. And I started to work this program with my sponsor, with Mary Thayer. I spent a lot of time in Maine with her as often as I could go. I'd take the kids, I'd take them up there. We'd go up and I'd spend Friday to Sunday. And she was like my rock, my God. And then one day she decided she's going to move to Santa Fe. I said, what? She said, yes, I'm moving to Santa Fe. I'm going to go to school out there. I said, you are? Why? What do you? Dependency. Here we are. So there was me and about, I don't know, 6 other women waving her off. She's driving now to Santa Fe. I'm out of my mind. We're all crying. She isn't. She's happy to get out. I was pissed. And we're all in her driveway waving goodbye. And I'm like hysterical. And everybody else is too. And at this point, I was living in New Hampshire. And she said, I will call you tonight when I get into Pennsylvania. I said, okay. So I drove home and I was so depressed. I was like, I had this feeling again, like, oh my God, it was horrendous. And I remember going home and I was in my little place in New Hampshire and she called me that night and she said, how are you doing? I said, I can't believe you've gone. What am I going to do? And she said, Missy, maybe I've failed you. I said, you haven't failed me. She said, yeah, I'm not your God. I said, I know that, but she said, I'm not your God. You have to find a God. I said, well, I have a God. She said, no, I'm not your God. And so that was the beginning for me. She left. And, you know, I saw her in the summer. We talked on the phone a lot, but I found a God. I had no choice. You know, I had to, every time I've had to do something in this program, I've had to surrender with such pain. It's like what Richard Rohr says, we have to die before we can live. And I started reading everything I could get my hands on spiritually. I had been doing that since day one, but I read Emmett Fox. I love Emmett Fox. I read the Big Book. I worked with other people. I read Thomas Keating. I loved Scott Peck's book, The Road Less Traveled. That was one. First paragraph, life is difficult. I didn't even know that. I was amazed. It was like an epiphany to me. Life is difficult. Wow. Okay. So maybe I've had this wrong somehow. And I started getting into this stuff very, very deeply. And it was how I developed some sense of something that was going to take care of me. And what I didn't know, and I know now, is that inside of me is where God resides. It's this little tiny flicker. I probably always had it my whole life, but I was never taught about that as a child. But an interesting thing, when I was a little girl, I would go to Sunday school. My parents didn't go to church, but some father in the neighborhood would pick us up on Sunday, my sister and me. We'd go off to this little Sunday school. And I loved reading about Jesus. And I loved my little Bible that they gave me. And I would come home into that crazy, chaotic, alcoholic home where everything was crazy and banging into each other and yelling in the night. And I was so frightened. And I'd go into my little closet, which was I could walk into. And I'd sit on the floor. I had a little blanket and a little flashlight. And I'd read the Bible. And I would get tremendous comfort from that as a little girl. So there is this sense, as it talks about in our big book, that there is in every man and woman this concept of conception of something in us. And I started to tap into that. And I started to grow. You know, I came into this program and I had to clean myself up. And then I had to grow up and stop with the childish high school jealous crap that I was so burdened with, bonded with. Oh, and then I had to wake up. And I was starting to wake up. And I started to look at things from a different angle because of these steps, because of the fourth step, giving the stuff to God. It was not a big deal. It was simple. You do your fourth step, you look at your columns, you write down what is so bad in your mind. You look at those fears, and then what do? I didn't know. Well, I don't know what you do. Well, you do your fifth step with your sponsor, whoever you feel that you can do that with. Trust. I always did it with Mary. And then I go for my sixth step, and I have an hour where I have to sit with my God and go over all of this. And if there's anything I want to change at that point or add to, I do. And then the seventh step is the prayer. That's it. He said, that's it. That's it. And then you wait. And I had to wait, sometimes a long time, before I would feel a shift in me. And I've started to do that. I started to do that. I started to clean up stuff. I started to have a voice. I started to have a little bit more self-esteem. I started to work on my finances. I started to be a mother. That was wonderful. I remember one day that Mary came to visit, and it was early on, and I was sitting around the table. She was there. We're all smoking and drinking coffee, a bunch of women in the program. My little guy was probably 10 or 11, and he had a bedroom that was right off the kitchen, and we were all yakking about. Mary wasn't. Mary was very quiet. And we were all gossiping about men and how awful they were and the boyfriends we had, blah, blah, blah. And after all the women left, Mary looked at me and she said, Bill was right in that other room when you were talking about all these horrible men. I said, yeah. And she said, well, he's going to be a man someday. He's a little boy. He's listening to all of this. He doesn't have a father in his life. What are you doing? Laser to the brain. And I'm like, oh man. But you know what? I'm looking back on this, and I mentioned this to Mary not long ago. I wanted to get well. And, I might have blanched at that at first and said, oh God, ouch, that hurts. Why? But I needed to hear every single solitary bit of that, every bit of it. Even to this day, I have to hear the truth. So things started to change for me. And we all kind of grew up together. My kids are great. They're not alcoholic, which is amazing. Have a few isms, but that's okay. And then I got married in sobriety. I married a wonderful, wonderful man. Some of you who are here tonight know him. He passed away 2 years ago in July. And he had 47 years of sobriety when he passed away. But we got married in 1993, and he's the love of my life. And he had custody of 2 little girls. I was 49 years old when I married him. And Margaret and Kate were 7 and 5. My kids were all launched and gone and doing their own lives. And I had my girlfriend say, what are you doing? And I said, I love him. And we all moved in together as a family. And I think I have to say the principal thing that we both did is that we did not live together until we were married. Was never the case for me before. And I never thought about children's feelings about that. They had a mom, and but Jack had custody. We all got married together, all of us. Kids were in it. It was quite an event, and I was very proud of that, and so was he. And then we all lived together, and I went into crisis mode. Thought I was pretty spiritual. I was what was I? I don't know, 15 years sober, perhaps. Very spiritual. Hello, God helped a lot of women. I was great. And I had to share this home with the ex-wife who would visit a lot. And I went right back to default Missy. And it was a disaster. And it was horrible. And I was jealous. I had fear that he was going to go back to her, which was absolutely not the case. I was so deluded in my thinking. I was so crazy. And I was scared because I loved him and I knew he wouldn't put up with this. He was a little bit healthier than I was. But he would react to me. So one night I got in the car and screw you, and the fights. And it was horrible. I was shocked that I couldn't believe I was sober. I'd go to meetings. I wouldn't discuss it with anybody. I talked to Mary, and it was just horrible. And she said, I'll tell you this in a little bit. I ran up to Maine. She was back in Maine. I think it was in the fall or something. And I had a phone that was like the shoebox, in my car back then before cell phones. And Jack kept calling me. I wouldn't answer. I mean, we were like teenagers screaming at each other. And I got into Mary's house and I said, he is such a, what, blah, 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 like 4-letter words. And she said, I don't want to hear one thing about Jack Donahoe. And here's this ouch again, like, oh, geez, I've just driven 2.5 miles up this damn highway and I have to listen to this. And she said, get in here. I don't want to hear one word about him. I want to know what you're up to. Ugh. Now I am hostage in Maine for the weekend with this woman who I knew loved me enough to tell me the truth about who I was. And I did a 4th step on my marriage. I did a 4th step on Jack. And By Sunday afternoon, I had put on a new pair of glasses and I saw things from a different angle, and I saw myself and I saw the fear, and I gave it to God. And I came down the highway, and I was, I walked into our house and he was there, and we took the kids and we went down to the beach, and they played on the beach a little bit. It was in the fall. And we sat in the car and I made my amends to him. And I said, I love you and I am so sorry. I didn't have to go into any details with him because he's not my sponsor, but I acted differently and we started to have a life. And I'll tell you, I started to grow up and I went pretty deeply with my God. And it was amazing. Another amazing, wonderful thing that probably some of you do know, Mary and I have had the great privilege and honor to do retreats for the last 20 years together. And when we were able, we would do maybe 2 a year. And we did them in the New England area. And we started out doing them with women. And I was able to do a fourth step on Saturday mornings. We'd start Friday night. Saturday morning, I would do, and I would share my fourth steps with these people. And there was a lot of anonymity. And I had God on board. So I knew that it would be okay to share these things. And I knew, and I had spoken to Jack, and I told Jack, I said, I'm going to be saying these things at this retreat about our marriage. Is that okay with you? He said, sure, absolutely. I would never do that without asking him, you see. And it was like once or twice a year, I would go through this process. And it was so healing because I could share these things with others. And we did it in a mixed group too. We did one last summer in Santa Fe, which was wonderful. I've never been to Santa Fe. I've loved it. And the Yules were there, right? And all my buddies. It was a wonderful retreat. So it was an easy way for us to see each other and have our, just pick up on our friendship again, which we've never lost, and to do a real refresher of things. And I started out with Jack. He was the enemy. Then I did a wonderful one on marriage, and how it was the principle of marriage. Because what I was looking for him to do were things that I thought he should do based on what I knew about my family's marriage, which was cracked. It was the most cracked marriage. It was the dance they did forever. And I'm like living off this principle of their marriage it was insane. And I was able to get all of that done. Oh my God, it was wonderful. What a wonderful program we have. What a wonderful program we have. I'm so grateful to be sober. And I'm at a place now when I knew that Jack was going to die. He was very, very sick. He died of pulmonary fibrosis, which is a horrendous illness. It's a lung scar, almost like COVID in a way, I think. And it's genetic, and his sister died of it. And, we got the diagnosis about 2 years before he died, and I took care of him. And he was here in this house with me, and we talked a lot. And we both had our own programs, and we were open, and he wasn't afraid. And he was just a magnificent person. And he loved me like no one's ever loved me, and me too. I mean, it was just a wonderful thing. And the anticipation of his death just crushed me. And I'd get into the shower at night, and he slept in the guest room because he had oxygen and all this stuff. So I'd go into our master bedroom at night, and I'd take a shower, and I would just cry my eyes out. And it broke my heart. Broke my heart. But you know what I have to share with you? Because emotional sobriety for me has been an evolution of my soul. And it's where I am today. And I was not angry at God. I never even prayed to God to save him because I know that's ridiculous. I just said, let's just pray that he doesn't suffer, pray that I can have the courage to carry on with him and take care of him, which was really daunting some days. And I guess what I probably like to say is that I am in a place of neutrality. I know that there are, we all have losses, and this was a major, huge loss for me. Probably the biggest one in my life. I've lost a sibling. I've lost my parents. It's different. This was devastating, but I've come to realize that grief is nothing really more than love. If I didn't love Jack, I would say, well, sorry. But, I loved him, and I'm going to grieve that, and I'm okay. I'm really okay. I think he's around. I have a great, I've had to dig very deep. And you know what? I've gone back to basics. I've gone back to reading Emmett Fox. I've gone back to reading Keaton. I read with Mary Thayer and Jackie every Wednesday. We read out of our little spiritual books. I read poetry that I love. I read things that bring me into the place of my soul where I can feel it. And I'm okay. And I'm grateful. And I'll tell you something. There was I think there was a quote by a poet. I think it's William Blake. Yeah, William Blake was a poet, and he talked about what was wrong with me was divine disconnect. I love that. I've always been disconnected, but I'm not disconnected anymore. I have a God of my understanding that loves me. I help others. I have a tremendous amount of empathy and compassion for people that have losses. I cry at the drop of a hat. I cry over what's happening with pandemic and the people in this world. But I think there's something happening that is a tremendous spiritual shift. And I'm waiting to see what God has in store. Geez, I never thought I'd talk this long, Sam. My God. Almost an hour. Well, I guess I had things to say. This has been wonderful for me. Thank you all for listening.
Thank you so much for
Thank you.
sharing yourself with us tonight. That was beautiful. Missy, do you have, we usually have the person who moderates call on a couple people, and you can probably look at your screen and see you probably see a lot of people here that you know. Would you mind calling on a couple people?
Not at all. Let me just see. Well, Mary Thayer, of course. Yeah.
Hi, Mary Thayer, alcoholic. God, it's like the third time we've talked today, huh?
Right.
Yeah, it's a gift. Missy and I have often thought how odd we came from such wacko families and known each other since we were 6. And as Jackie could attest to, most of the time we still act like we're 6 years old when we're together. But we're talking sometime just this past week about probably one of the things that has been the saving grace between Missy and I is, first of all, we know each other completely, and that's a gift that it's really grace. But the quality that keeps us going is a sense of humor. And I remember early on when I was in California, I sobered up in California, and my sponsor, and I was in just dire straits, something happened and I was going to drink. I felt just terrible. It was day by day type thing. And I was over at her house and something was going on and everybody started laughing at this one fellow and situation that was going on. And I found myself laughing. And I looked at Bev and I said, Beverly, I'm laughing. And she said, yes. And when you're laughing, you're closest to God.
Right.
And hindsight looking back, I mean, even no matter how bad things get, we've been able to find something to laugh about. And when Jack was dying, for God's sakes, and we were going through that, all he'd have to say, he was an Irishman. Oh God, and the jokes. I mean, he was just unbelievable. But he'd say, hey, pal, I got a joke for you. I would be hysterical on the floor, and he hadn't even started in on the joke. It would be like, we would just laugh just all the time. And Miss, I don't know how we, I've never, you sponsor people. Who would you ever think you'd sponsor for 41 years? And I didn't want to be your sponsor. I really didn't, because I wanted to, she's my best friend. And I truly believe that when you're asked to be a sponsor, you have to tell people the truth. This is their soul. I believe it's a soul sickness. And when we do things against the values and the principles of our souls, I think is one of the reasons I drank. I didn't want to take a look at what I was up to. And if I'm doing that stuff within recovery, because it says, what is it on page 45, something that the main purpose of the book is to find a God that will help you solve your problem. That means we're going to talk about things that are spiritual as well as moral. And, so what are my morals? What are my spiritual morals here? And it took me a long time, but finally with Missy and I doing the 20 years of doing that a couple of times a year or more, I think it's been 25 years. But anyway, I finally saw how the fourth step says to write a fearless moral inventory. It doesn't say to write a fearful garbage inventory. It says a fearless moral inventory. And Hugh Douglas taught me this. He said, what are your morals? What are your values? Not your parents, not your sponsors, not your priest or rabbi or whoever's, but what are your morals and where are you going against them? And that book, The Black Lines, lays that right out for you. It's a path to be able to find out what values you have and where you've been going against them. I love you, Miss. There's no other words I can say on that. I don't know how I'd do it without you. She had to walk me off the wall. I was so devastated tonight with the reality of this disease. I went for a trike ride and some woman called me over and she was just asking me to call an ambulance, and I did. And anyway, she had these two dogs. Turned out I said, what is the matter? And she said, I'm an alcoholic. And I thought, oh, there you go. All right. And, so the police came, the ambulance came, but she had these two little dogs and she wanted me to bring them into her home. And I walked into her home and I almost vomited. I've been on lots of 12-step calls, but the devastation of this disease and where it takes us, it was just a reminder tonight that I again am so grateful for this God, the presence that's entered my life that has kept me sober today. Anyhow, Jackie, I think we should hear from the trio here. Jackie, how about it? Oh, Missy, I'm sorry. Was that okay for me to call on Jackie?
Okay. That's fine, Mary. Yeah. Hi, Jackie.
Hi. Thank you so much, Missy. Thank you, Mary. And I got to tell you, these two have been very, very entertaining. Continue. We laugh a lot, and I'm so grateful for that. And Missy was talking about Mary going off to Santa Fe. And thank God she did, because it was in the first class that we were in that class together. We met. Right. And that's been 30 years ago. And Mary knows me better than I know myself. And Missy, thank you so much. You're such a demonstration. You tell my story. We both had the background, except for the money.
Wow.
The feelings and everything else. And what I've come to find out in this program is that I wish we would just grow up and get there, but we don't. If you listen to the three of us sometimes, you would think we were about 12. If that, maybe.
Right.
Anyway, but it's, at least we have the chance of growing up in here. And I know Missy talked about growing up with her kids, and my daughter turned 12 the day after I quit drinking. And I always said it was really debatable who was more mature. And so we talk now, and we grew up together. And thank God I stayed in this program, because every time I work the steps and continue to go to meetings and do what I'm told to do and go through any pain that comes along or anything, even the highs, it's like I continue, I'll get a little more mature and then something will happen. And a week ago, you would not think I had any maturity. I was, man, I had a moment of relapse in immaturity and called my son-in-law names, which I never do. And my husband now every morning, he's been getting up saying, how you feeling this morning? so, I'm so grateful for this program because I could stay there if I didn't have Alcoholics Anonymous, if I didn't have the relationship I have with my higher power and the soul work that we do. And, today I do know it's all about love and it's all about laughter. And I told Mary the other day, I said, I love deep. And I says, I grieve deep. And she said, what a gift. And I am so grateful for that. So it is so good to see everybody here. I've been coming and I kind of stay in the background, and keep quiet. But that's just me. But I really, really enjoyed your talk tonight, Missy. And thank you so much for being that demonstration and my friend.
Thank you, Jackie. Thanks. Okay. Anybody else?
Well, I will, yeah, if you guys want to open it up, Missy?
Sure.
All right. So if anybody would like to share, please raise your hands in the participant box. What about Aaron Ham?
Hey, what's up, everybody? I'm Aaron. I'm an alcoholic.
Hi, Aaron.
It's always so different, Sharon, in this meeting. I feel like the guy that gets called down at like halftime at like an NBA game to like do the half court shot. Like you don't belong on the court. You know what I'm saying? And but no, I respect a lot of people in here, and I'm just grateful to be here. That story, I'm sorry, I was getting some phone calls and I got my family downstairs, so I was kind of in and out. But what I did here was just, I don't know, so impressive to me. I love the part, it just kind of what strikes me with what I'm going through now is how you were sharing about, having the difficulties at home and you went to your sponsors and I guess Mary's your sponsor, said, we're not going to talk to you about your husband at all. You know what I'm saying? Like, I don't even want to hear about that. And it's funny, I go to Sam, he's my sponsor, like, and I'll come with this big grievance or how somebody's just really out of line, and it would really help society as a whole to kind of straighten them out. And he don't want to talk about that. He's just kind of, it's always back on me. And I feel like, I know in my heart that's the way to deal with things. Like every little fiber of my instinct cries out like, no, you don't understand. Like we need to take care of this. But deep down below all that, I know that if whether it's my perspective or my outlook or whatever, that I need to do some work on me. And I always joke about it with my guys, like when we're doing, I don't know, when I'm talking with my people, like the meetings after the meeting, at no point have I found in the literature where like the answer is to retaliate or like dig your heels in or be stubborn or, just it's not in there, and sometimes I wish it was, but I don't know. And, just I don't know, the relationship stuff, I could never, I don't even know. I'm not sure if I want to delve in. It might be another topic for another night, but I don't know. I just, the relationship stuff I never did well with, I'm an insecure person. I can be needy, even though I don't like to say that, I'll get nervous about something, but then if you, ask your spouse about it, then you kind of look kind of weak and, insecure. But if you don't, then like you kind of stew and think the worst. And I don't know, it's not a good spot to be in. And, the only solution I've really found to that is spiritual principles. You know what I'm saying? I mean, really, that's all there is, for me. But I don't know, man, I really do respect the hell out of this meeting. I come here and I'm not joking what I said in the beginning. Like I don't know. It's a real difficult kind of time to get on a meeting because family or nighttime is kind of when we all do things as a family. And we have a, 2-year-old son and my wife's pregnant and we kind of get together, we eat, put him to bed, all this stuff. But I mean, not if I didn't do this, I wouldn't have that for one, but two, I mean, this meeting makes such an impact on me that I make sure not to miss it every week. So I hope you know I appreciate everybody who shares, all the regulars. I just soak it up like a sponge. So anyway, Sam, thanks for calling on me, bro. And yeah, that's really all I got tonight. Thank you guys.
Thanks, Aaron.
Thanks, Aaron. Jenny, you have your hand up?
Hi, I'm Jenny. I'm an alcoholic. Yes, thank you so much for that. Dependency, you had talked about dependency, and I think I think when working with my sponsor, I think we have talked about that, but it's something I forget, I think sometimes. And my dad passed away in 2012 from cancer, and I took care of him as well. And he was my best friend. I was at his house all the time. And actually, I bought their house. My mom moved out, and I bought their house, so I live here now in the house I grew up in. So that's pretty cool. But I was very dependent. He was also an alcoholic, but he wasn't a mean alcoholic. He didn't ever share. He was very quiet. So then when he was, I didn't see it that way. And then after, going through the chapter with the wives, then I understood what my mom was saying, because I know after he passed away, she was really kind of didn't say nice things about him. And why would you say that to your daughter? Yeah. So there's a lot of stuff, and I didn't, but when I was younger, I would drink and stuff, but then after he passed away, that's when I started drinking. And that's when, I didn't, after just hearing this tonight, when you were sharing that, I realized I was very dependent upon him. He was the only one I could talk to, and I didn't have him there to talk to anymore. I didn't have anybody to care for me, is what I thought. I'm married. I have 2 kids. I have a 14-year-old and a 9-year-old. And how, I don't know. It's just crazy. But I also really loved how you said emotional sobriety is an evolution of the soul. Wow. That, yeah, I'm going to have to paint that and hang that on my wall, because that's wow. But also, after I had my son, I was 22. That's when I had depression. I got anxiety. I ended up in the hospital due to all of that. And I could never figure out how to be okay, how to live without the fear and stuff. And it's only because of this program, and the spiritual aspect of this program, and just everything. I don't live that type of life anymore. And so I really appreciate that. And I will pass. I'm just rambling, but I really appreciate it. And thank you so much for this meeting.
Oh yeah, so good to see you. Thank you for sharing. Kate Y from Akron.
Yes. Hi. I'm Kate. I'm an alcoholic from Akron, Ohio. And I just wanted to say hi. I love this group. I've been coming now for, I don't know, a couple months. I had learned about this at one of the FOTS weekends, with all the horrible things that have happened, in the past year with, the pandemic and everything. I have to say that a good thing for me is just the Zoom, because my husband's had Parkinson's disease now for since he was 45, and now he's 68. And so I'm his caregiver, and I'm more limited, in when I can get out. And we had Fellowship of the Spirit here in Cuyahoga Valley, little ones, and Tom Yule and Juanita came up, and I mean, you guys are like my heroes. And although I have my own God, I have God in my understanding. I don't mean that you're my God or anything, but I would never be able to go to Santa Fe, or, I mean, there's FOTS Australia coming up next weekend, and it's just like, oh my God, this is so amazing. And so I've gotten to go to 3 or 4 different FOTS conferences that I would never have been able to go to. And it feeds my soul. It feeds me spiritually to see you all. And even though we're not in person, I get to hear these wonderful things. I can relate to so much. I was so dependent on my husband years ago. He was my God. He really was. He was a doctor. He made a lot of money, blah, blah, blah. And now everything's turned around. It's the opposite now, as far as all that goes. But I definitely had to learn about emotional sobriety in the midst of my sobriety. I've been sober, 27 years, but I had quite some really hard knocks along the way. So my goal, I work real hard at staying spiritually fit, to take care of my husband, and to be there for my sponsees, I'm just so grateful for this group and for your honesty, and everyone sharing from their soul and from their heart, and sharing their feelings. I love that Missy said, she wanted to share feelings, that we all have events, but to talk about, I'm probably messing up how you said it, but that we share our feelings is really important too. And I just want to thank you all for being here. And Mary there, I got to see you, like one of the other, they're these big soul people, spiritual giants, and I just love being able to be a part of it, even though I'm here in Akron, Ohio. And with that, I'll pass. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Kate.
Thank you. And we have Karen. Hey, Karen, W, did you want to share?
Sorry. Hey, sorry about that.
No problem.
I'm using my phone, a little different. My name's Karen. I'm an alcoholic.
Hi, Karen.
Missy, I met you last summer.
You did?
I did, in Santa Fe.
Oh.
And I will tell you, it's amazing what a year does to a person who doesn't follow the steps and the principles of AA. I was, like you, dependent on a sponsor who, on the flip side of it, left here and went to Maine and had no idea. But I got angry because that, as an alcoholic, for me, is my go-to. And I began to flap my wings around trying to figure out what was wrong. Anyway, long story short, my mother died in my arms this summer, flying in the middle of this pandemic back east to get there because she was going to die immediately. And my mother, they took the oxygen off. She had a DNR. She took the oxygen off, realized it was me, her only daughter. She stayed awake for another 8 hours. And you talk about being able to feel that spirit of God. And it took me on a journey, and I heard that in you. And it was, I guess the day before yesterday, Tom Mule sent me off the Bill Wilson essay that this is based on emotional sobriety. And I just wept because I'm coming out of a very deep depression that I was in, plus the stage of my sobriety, plus grief. And it took me running east thinking I was going to go save the day for my brother, who's now diagnosed with stage 4 cancer. And he gave me the gift. He didn't let me get too close. So I just kept going out, and reaching out to where nature was. Because for me, I had to get close to God. And then that sponsor in Maine said, get up here. And just like Mary Thayer, she sat my ass down. And she said, this isn't about you anymore. This is about your relationship with your higher power. And you need to get out of the way and start listening to what God is saying. And it was the most powerful third step I did on the East Coast, and the most powerful fifth step I did. I'm not to my sixth, so I can't tell you what happens. But I have to tell you, I will never walk away from this program again, ever. Because of stories like you, I feel okay today. I feel like I'm all right, and I didn't feel okay. And just like that essay, I now have a recipe.
Mhm.
Thanks, Missy.
Thank you, Karen.
Appreciate you.
Thank you so much.
Mm. Mm.
What about Mike and Jessica? One or two of them.
I don't know. You
Who's
pick.
it gonna be?
One after the other.
Okay.
Jessica first.
All right.
Okay. Sounds bad. That's a good idea.
That's how it should always be, right? I'm Jessica, alcoholic.
Hi, Jessica.
Hi, everybody. Wow, what a meeting tonight. You know, it's good to speak. We've been kind of locking into this meeting the past month or 2 months. I don't know. And it's kind of our spiritual night. It's like you bring just so much richness of AA to Nashville, and I just soak it up. And tonight was really cool. I mean, as a woman in AA and hearing all the stories and the friendships, and 41 years, I think is what you three said. It was amazing, and everything you walked through, and it was just so inspiring to me to hear that and hear the women before me. And I mean, I feel really lucky that I got to find emotional sobriety. I mean, I didn't find emotional sobriety, but I found women that had emotional sobriety, you know, the first year and a half sober. And it saved my life, really, because I wouldn't have stayed. I can't stay sober unless my life is better in sobriety than it is out there. I just can't do it. So, and I didn't know how to get that, but the women I found, you know, they had that serenity that I see in y'all, and they taught me their ways, and little by little, you know, and still inching away at 8 years. I'm still young. It's funny, when I was younger in AA, I would go, oh, wow, in a few years, I'm going to be mature in AA, you know, like these ideas we have, you know, and the older I get, the more I realize how really young I am, and how much more there is to grow and learn. And I'm grateful for that. I am grateful for that, because that is humility, and I did not have that. I didn't even know what that was. So thank you all so much for your shares. And Sam, thanks for bringing this meeting every week. It really means a lot. It means a lot to me and my girls, and man, it's amazing. So thanks.
Thanks, Jessica.
Thank you.
Yeah.
What
Nice,
about it, Mike?
Nice, Mike. I'm an alcoholic. And yeah, I mean, it's interesting, like, to sit next to Jessica and hear Missy share the Mary Thayer, and just kind of, you know, think about my very first sponsor in AA had 44 years when I met him. And he also was from the East Coast. He was a Boston kid from Dorchester. So he was piss and vinegar Irish guy. But I don't know. Knowing her story and hearing your guys's, I thought AA was, you know, and I've been through rigorous treatment. At least I thought I was. And I've been lied to in the program. I put all my dependence in a sponsor that burned me down. And I've been up and down in this program. And I finally had a spiritual experience in the end of 2018. but then I kind of rested on my laurels, and I thought that AA was just like, yeah, you go to some meetings, remind you that you have a drinking problem and that what can happen. Yeah. But I try to keep it really, really simple, because I had this talk with God where all my gray area in my life had been basically dissolved. My entire life, I never wanted to commit to anything. I never wanted to be on either side politically. I think the most committed I ever was picking a football team. That's about it. So that all dried up, and God basically said, do you want to drink or do you want to be sober? Because if you drink, you're choosing alcohol over me. You talk a lot about how you trust me, but you don't seem to trust me very much. So I made a decision to trust him, but then I thought that's all I had to do. And life did not, it was easy for a while, but then I met this person and realized that I was not anywhere near where I needed to be suitable to be a boyfriend, even let alone a husband. And I got to hear what her experience was like, having almost 2 years sober and feeling like she was dying. You know, a lot of people, when they have a month sober or 2 weeks sober, to think about somebody having a year going, oh man, they got it all together. I can't wait to be like that. But they don't think that there's some people that go 20 years in this program and are just dying inside because they think that this is all just about going to meetings and, sponsoring a couple guys passively. But I'm a very deep thinker guy, and there's a lot more to life than meets the eye. And I've always wanted to go in the deep end of things. And once I've been going through this with Sam, and this meeting started out being 9 guys in your living room, beginning in January. Aaron was there, Chris and Corey, and now it's turned into this juggernaut of a meeting. And yeah, this is something we look forward to every week. And I feel like I've been squeezed out of a needle hole. and it's been a crazy experience. I feel like I'm finally growing up and in a very short period of time. So yeah, I thank everyone, all the regulars that share as well. I'm going to piggyback on Aaron's comment. And Sam, thanks so much for what you do, man. God bless you.
Thank you guys.
Thanks, Mike.
I love this line that Mark Ace used to talk about, and he would say that you can add to my life, but you can't take away. And that was from having the right dependency. Like when my dependency and I'm whole and I don't need you to be whole, you can add to it, but you can't take anything away. And I think that I really have felt the need and desire to get back to this place of centeredness and try and bring peace and love back to people over the last few weeks. It's just been really crazy, and we've had a lot of people coming in and out and visitors and, a lot of stuff happening. And I think it's really important for me to focus on, and this is a lot the essay is about, is how am I showing up for the world and for other people? It's not about me. And I love that journey you talked about, Missy, not just through alcohol, not just through active drinking, but through sobriety, that, looking for a father and finding dependency in relationships and all these other issues and all these dependencies that crop up to bring wholeness, these kind of cheap substitutes for a real relationship with God. And when I have that, and when I have that conscious awareness and I'm able to spread that to other people, I'm in a whole nother stratosphere, and I'm not living in that anxiety and fear all the time. And that's something that I aspire to every day is kind of what my thing is. So I really appreciate you guys today. And Missy, that was beautiful. Is there anything that you might want to mention? So I like to ask people a question. Is there anything you might want to mention that you think you might have forgot about or that you thought about after you got done sharing?
Got another couple of hours?
Yeah.
I always do that. I go home after I speak or something. I go, damn, I wish I had said that.
We'll make sure you call on you next week. Yeah,
okay.
We'll call on you next week.
All right.
And
it's been great, Sam. Thank you.
Hey, thank you so much for coming. I mean, that was one of those shares that just people will be thinking about, and I'll be thinking about.
You're nice
for the
to
rest
say
of the week,
that. You're
maybe if we could close this meeting we like to say, close, say, go into our inner room, just because it gets so weird saying the same prayer in unison over Zoom, that we just kind of go to our inner room and say the Lord's Prayer. But tonight, maybe we could do a special prayer and then do that. And maybe I'll lead it. God of the happy, joyous, and free, we pray for the woman tonight that Mary Thayer was working with or had met, and all those who are struggling, with alcoholism and those effects on their families and the children of alcohols. And we pray for that woman tonight. And I just asked maybe we could send some love out there, and we'll go to our inner room and I'll kind of send some love to that woman and to the still suffering alcoholics out there, and close with the Lord's Prayer to ourselves. Thank you, everyone. Great meeting. Thank you again, Missy.
Thank you, Sam. Thanks,
Thanks,
everybody.
Missy. Thank you, Sam. Bye.
Thank you,
you.
Missy.
Thank
Thank
you,
Missy.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Missy.
Thanks, Missy.
Thank you. Oh, my goodness. This was great.
Thank you so
Missy.
much.
Thank you, Sam, for bringing this incredible meeting to us every week. What a blessing in the
Thank you.
midst of craziness.
Thanks for joining. My pleasure.
Missy, thank you. 20 to hear.
Oh,
You really touched me. You know, I'm very grateful that I know you.
oh, I love you, hon. And Tom, too. Thank you.
Missy. Unbelievable. Fantastic. Really moved me as well.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Tom,
Missy.
you're looking very handsome, Tom.
Thank you,
It's a
Missy.
very handsome mule over there, is it not?
Easy, Corey, easy.
Good night, everyone. Have a good weekend.
Good night.
Good
Brad, you look really handsome too over there. You look very handsome with the glasses and the computer and the black and the beard. I like this. You look very handsome.
Thanks, Juanita.
Guys.
Bye, Tom.
Thanks for sharing, Missy. Thanks for Sam, Chris, and Corey.
You're welcome. Thank you. Hey, did you drive safe the rest of the way?
I'm almost home now. Y'all have carried me from DC to Richmond and a lot farther.
Probably a lot farther is the best part. Well, I'm glad you made it home safe. We always love seeing you and hearing from you too. Bye, Chris. You suck.
You did a really good job reading that.
I really hated it for the first 30 seconds. It was the worst, and you are going to do it next week.
All right, you host on Zoom. You deal with letting people into from the waiting room.
I'll see what I can throw together. I don't know.
Yeah, well, we're gonna get you on there as co-host.
I saw Jeff on Monday at
FE?
at Drunks Talking Principles.
Oh God, is that just?
It was.
Is a super spreader meeting?
No, so we tried to do it that was going to be our first time in person, was going to be this Monday, and we were going to have it, socially distanced outside of 202. And then we got there and they were like, oh, you didn't tell us that you're going to do this. We already have a house meeting filled up in this slot. And we were like, okay. So we went across the street to Coco and just did it over there.
Nice.
Yeah. But it's not going to be in person for a while again, just cause it's easier to do. And It's freezing outside.
It's
I
getting a
went
little chilly. Getting a little chilly.
You got to come to that Tuesday night meeting at the Buchanan Log Cabin.
I can't, man. I gotta I host a Zoom meeting on Tuesday night that I've been
For
hosting.
what?
It's a funny meeting. It's a Joe and
Is that
Charlie.
Isn't it Joe and Charlie thing?
live? Is that like a live one?
Who's that?
That's Matthew. He doesn't have his video on his he can't figure out how to put his name.
I just got back from working out and I'm taking my clothes off, so I don't really want to show my video.
Well, what if we wanted to see that?
So that Buchanan meeting.
Yeah, what about it?
Is it live? Is it in
It's
person?
live, in person. I'm the GSO or GSR for that group. They just mailed me a giant thing in the mail. I was like,
well,
oh,
let's see how much of a GSR you really are. Are you going to the assembly this weekend?
Hey, do you
I
do
am not,
better
because
at
I
running
did
the
not
Zoom
know about it
meetings
till
than
just
Chris
now.
does?
Like this week, Aaron and I were talking about it. It's in person. If you say your phone number, I'll text you the address. It's in person. It's at 7:30. It's about 20 people. We sit outside just so we can, accommodate as many people as possible. So it will be cold. This Tuesday was very, very cold.
Nice.
But yeah, I don't know. Have I met you? I don't know if I've met you.
No, I don't think. Well, I mean, no, I don't think we have. I mean, I've been to this meeting quite often, but but no, we haven't.
Yeah, come out on Tuesdays. I'm always I'm out there. That's one of my.
How many people usually show up?
About 20 to 25 ish.
That's what's really important.
Oh, you need to keep that number low or something, or
no?
It's just like if you said like it's 5 people, he'd be like, no, that's lame. I'm not gonna go. So
yeah. Well, I wouldn't show up if it was 5 people either. I'd be like, fuck that, I'm good.
Oh, see,
I'm not gonna sit outside in the fucking freezing cold for a 5-person meeting that I could do over a phone call.